117 is the shot clock issue. Let's go ahead and do that. Is staff here to do that? Okay, Councilmember Alter. We also have Bobby Levinsky here to talk about, and we have staff here to set that up.
Okay.
If we need it.
Should I ask my questions first, or should we let Mr. Levinsky speak?
Why don't you ask your question first, and then Mr. Levinsky can then incorporate it into his comments if he wants to.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions that I wasn't able to resolve with my staff and from the briefing and the memo material that I wanted to understand. First of all, the flag lots part of it, I'm not really understanding. It seems like we're now allowing flag lots, but is that only in a particular situation that we're allowing them?
Yeah, thank you, Council. I'm happy to answer that. Andy Linsheisen, Development Services. So as part of this action, and let me just preference for the audience listening, this item is an ordinance amending Land Development Code, Titles 25 and 30, to make changes to comply with the new state law, House Bill 3167, which goes into effect on September 1st, just to say what we're actually talking about. Staff took an extensive analysis of the subdivision code, looking at the risks associated of how to consider the code and look for opportunities where we could minimize the risk of an automatic approval. This legislation requires that we act at the commission level within 30 days. We went through our code and looked at variances, waivers, process, and analyzed where we exposed that if something came in that we were really opposed to, it could automatically get approved. And one of those items we identified was our flag lot process. Today, that is a land use commission variance. In the last year, we sent approximately 30 to the commission. One was denied. It is routinely approved by the commission. The criteria are pretty straightforward, and we felt like that to minimize our risk of posting errors, notice errors, staff being late and missing something, that necessitated, it is to avoid those risks, that it would be better to have that become a waiver considered by staff with the guidance from council on the policy, that the chances of staff approving a waiver that were different than the policy direction from council were much less than us missing something and having a subdivision and a variance that we really, really oppose be automatically approved by order of law. And so we have recommended that change. We did an extensive analysis of part of this legislation to try to find those opportunities to keep things off of the agenda. This legislation also allows things to keep coming back. Today when the commission acts, you're done. That is a final action. Under the changes in legislation, it can come back. The applicant can submit a responsive request and ask for another commission hearing, and that can happen multiple times. So we were looking for ways to keep things off of an agenda to minimize our risk of a posting error, a notification error. Although we really try our best, those happen, and it would really be unfortunate to have something that we are diametrically opposed to and don't support variances on suddenly be automatically approved with no conditions.
Hold on 1 second. Would you guys mind? I can't hear the two things. Thank you.
So yes, to answer your question, that's a long way of saying yes, we did make that change. But that was after looking at the history of how those variances have been considered by the commission. That was actually, I think, the only variance change we made. But we looked at that and said that exposes us to miss a posting error and have something like that get automatically approved.
Thank you. I understand this was not designed to be the most effective, efficient, and most desirous code changes for the benefit of our community. And I can see from reading it that you guys worked hard to do the best you could with what you were given from the state legislature in terms of mandates. The county is in this code. We don't usually see things that oblige the county. I know they're supposed to vote. Could you explain why the county their procedures are mentioned in our
absolutely.
code?
So the legislation changed both the local government code section 212 and 232, which regulates Travis County. And we have a single office with a interlocal agreement with Travis County. So things in our ETJ of Travis County, and that was a previous legislative action that generated that single office where we jointly review as staff. We come together and county staff do their part of the equation, our staff do our part. We call it Title 30, the Land Development Code. It's a single office code. It mirrors very closely Title 25. And so we have changed both codes. We've worked very closely with the county to come up with the regulations that are the same. We'll be holding a joint stakeholder meeting with them. We really are working as a single office. And so our request of you is to amend Title 30 and 25 so that they match. We've worked with the county to have this on the Commissioner's Court agenda for next Tuesday, where they could approve and adopt, which then puts it in effect before September 1st. So what you're seeing is the single office requirement that we work together with the county with our own code, and this is it only covers Travis County ETJ.
Thank you. As this is proposed, I understand that there may be some fiscal impact in the amount of staff. Is that true? And can you speak to that and how we're going to adjust our fee structure accordingly? Because we now have to get these done really quickly, which is going to require more staff, I would assume.
Yeah, thank you. That's absolutely we have worked very hard to establish coalition agreements with all departments who review with a mandate of 90% on time. That was our goal. We want to be 90% on time. So effectively, the state legislature just changed our goal from 90 to 100. If we are non-responsive, it is approved. So that does have a resource impact. This law was passed and implemented after our budget had already been submitted. So we have not at this time requested any additional resources or changes or fees. DSD, our department, has in our budget temporaries and overtime, as Rodney, I think, mentioned in a previous presentation to some of the council members. And that will be our short-term plan of how we intend to comply. I mean, we really don't have a choice, so we will get there. I think we'll be working with our other departments to assess after the next couple months, what does this really mean? How bad is the impact? And do we need to come back to you and ask for more resources, changes in fee structure? But at this time, we don't have enough information we didn't have enough time really to get that prepared. I would anticipate that there will be resource impacts. We may be able to wait to FY21 budget to address that, or we may have to come back, but I can't tell you with certainty. But there definitely is a resource impact to move from 90% on time to 100. That is absolutely correct.
So I would invite you to make sure that we know our resources at the appropriate time. It may be that it's too quick for September to know that. But if we need to make fee adjustments to do this on the timetable that the builders who are asking for this in the first place asked for, then we should do that so that the rest of the processes that we've been working really hard to improve can move forward appropriately. I think it's really important for the community to understand that we have a lot of the same people who are advocating from the building community for land development code changes are at the same time advocating the state legislature to make it harder for us to do permitting processes that lead to health and safety and allow us to uphold whatever code we have. And I would encourage you to read that list of people who testified. I don't have it in front of me now, but it is eye-opening in that regard. And I appreciate staff working as hard as they can to come up with a process that we can move forward with that will do our best to uphold what we need to uphold for the city. So thank you.
Okay, Councilor Tovo.
Yeah, I actually do have the list, and I appreciate Councilmember Alter. I think you may have asked the question that yielded that list of those who testified for the bill. And I saw that, I believe it was San Antonio's fire department testified against it, and I wonder if you could share with us what some of those who testified against the bill were concerned about. Were they concerned about health and safety issues potentially being overlooked with such a short imposed time clock?
Thank you, Councilmember. I believe the list might be myself, San Antonio, and one person from the American Planning Association in San Marcos who actually testified against it.
Well, there
I
were
went-
some different ones. I think somebody from Alamo Fireworks, and then also NAMI, someone from NAMI, and someone from ARP. If I'm sorry, that's Bill 3169. Okay, so the San Antonio Fire Department was on a different issue.
Yeah.
But if you would share with us
I can.
what the staff's concerns were
Yeah,
about
the
this.
staff's, what I expressed on behalf of the city was our concern with the timeframes being short, but the timeframe that they've adopted, 30 calendar days, was within the timeframes for our review today, which is 20 business days. The significant challenge that I expressed to the legislature with this legislation was the no new comments. That we are, if on the first review, we must identify all deficiencies, and we are prohibited now by state law from adding additional comments. That is a significant challenge for us. I think we will find a way to work within it where we still protect health, safety, welfare, but that is extremely challenging for us. So if the application changes, we'll be forced to deny the previous change, or we're still working on the formatting of our comments of how we're going to do that. But that was our main concern, and of course, this legislation impacted not just the city of Austin, but all cities in Texas, and we're all struggling with the same thing. But what was expressed to them was, that was going to be a very, very difficult mandate. And really, the biggest concern that I expressed personally was about the no new changes.
And so as I understand it, if you have one opportunity to provide comments, as you've just described, and you provide direction that there's a critical environmental feature or some other feature that necessitates their changes, when they come back with those changes, even if they've created a bigger issue potentially with regard to flooding risk or some other circumstances, that's the challenge you have about figuring out then what we have the ability under state law to do.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. And I believe that our stance on that would be to deny the corrections to the first change.
Okay.
That we will include language that your changes to the application cannot create future and other non-compliant issues. So if they change something that then creates another non-compliant issue, we'll have to say that the original change is denied. It's going to change how we work. It's going to make it more difficult. But we will do everything we possibly can to make sure we uphold our code and more importantly, protect health, safety, welfare pieces where it's absolutely critical. But it will be a challenge. There's no doubt.
Well, I appreciate your work and your commitment to making sure that we're still going to find ways to ensure our health and safety of residents. I was disappointed to see organizations like the Homebuilders Association of Greater Austin, the Texas Realtors, the Texas Apartment Association, KB Homes, others who are building lots of properties within the city of Austin, because it does seem to me that this makes it more challenging to make sure that the resulting apartments or the resulting homes are going to be done safely with a real focus on safety for those end users. So thank you again for your work.
Mayor, may I correct something that I said
Can I say, Mr. Flanagan?
before? Can I just correct something really
Okay.
quickly so it's not too far? I just wanted to acknowledge that there were a few people in our building community who did testify against this legislation. I believe Ron Thrower was among those, and I appreciate them recognizing that this was not good for our city. I didn't have the list in front of me.
Okay,
So.
Mr. Flanagan?
Thank you, Councilmember Alter. I'm glad that you added that part at the end. There are organizations that have decided to, on a number of topics, that they need to go to the legislature to get what they want. We talked about Sustainable Food Center doing that on food permits earlier, and that was also not something I look on favorably. But just like with that issue, which I was working on to help get a better path forward on the food permits, we are working on a better path forward on land code. So it's unfortunate that even when we're in the middle of a process to solve the problem, folks are going to the legislature, because inevitably what happens is the legislature does something very different than what they were asking for. That's certainly how Sustainable Food Center explains it. The legislature is not a city council, and I really wish they would stop trying to be one. They've got some big issues up there they should be solving that it would make everyone's lives easier, including the constituents in the city that they think are theirs as opposed to the rest.
Bobby Levinsky, you in here? You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Bobby Levinsky, Save Our Springs Alliance. I won't use all 3 minutes. I've signed in support of the ordinance because I think staff did a really good job with it. There's only one thing that I want to kind of get on record. It's not that I have any disagreement with the staff's language. It's just I want to make sure it's clear. I was able to talk to Mr. Linsize, and I want to make sure that that's just kind of part of the record, that I'm reading it correctly. So part of the concern with the variance process for subdivisions, that's usually what causes the delays. So staff created this pre-application process for the project assessment to when a variance is going to be needed, they do this assessment. The concern that then raises in my head is establishing something earlier in the process than an initial permit application for grandfathering purposes. So what I understand is 25163E has a 180-day deadline, and once the project assessment has been approved, that they'll have to then attach some sort of case number associated with that, which would be really important to make sure that whatever project was initiated will eventually expire. We don't create perpetual grandfathering. And I also understand that there's going to be a rules process that follows the ordinance passing today, which will establish a deadline for the application process. And as long as those are there, I think it's good. I just want to make sure we're really careful not to create a problem that we created back in like the 60s, 70s, where we had some permit applications that never had expiration dates. So let's just make sure we don't do that. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Further discussion on dais, Councilmember Pohl.
Mr. Linsizen, we've talked about the rulemaking procedures through draft up to final. Can you, I'd like to have staff come back to the council when those rules are finalized and have a presentation in open meeting. I think that rather than just have a memo, we can have a memo, but I would like to have the opportunity for us to ask questions and interact and make sure that we have a full appreciation, if that would be possible.
Yes, Councilman. So what I would suggest, so we have prepared draft rules, as Mr. Levinsky pointed out, and I do appreciate Mr. Levinsky really looking at what we're doing. I mean, he sent very, very good question. We had considered it, and we will, as he mentioned, be adopting a rule. So we were proposing for next week an emergency rule. An emergency rule is allowed by ordinance when you pass an emergency thing like this for us to put in place the procedures, policies that will drive our process through the rules. We're proposing as an emergency next week. Those have a limited life. We have to come back with permanent rules, and as part of our permanent rules, we'll have a stakeholder process. So what I would like to propose, if it would fit for your needs, would be that you give us a couple of months to let this play out, where we look for how is it working for staff, how is it working for your constituents, so that you can provide us feedback. Hey, the rules you adopted, that's not working. Please, consider these things, and we'll have a stakeholder meeting with our stakeholders, our applicants, before we propose a permanent rule to replace the temporary one, the emergency ones we're passing. So we do have a window. I believe we get 120 days to get that accomplished. So we have some time, and then there is an extension. So if your request is to come back in like 2 weeks, we certainly could, or we could, let this play out for a couple of months and see what the impacts are, and come back with a more holistic approach of, hey, this is what's happened. Here's what we're proposing for our permanent rules to correct anything that we have missed, because we did do this in about a month.
Yeah. No, I think I think the key is for us to understand what you've seen and how you're dealing with cases that may include variances or waivers, and so how staff will deal with the changes made to applications after submittal. So I think it's it's very reasonable for you to work through it and then come back and brief us fully. It may be that some individuals want earlier updates, and I may, but we can do that on a one-on-one. And I'm just confident that the state legislature has zero understanding about the complexities involved in land development code and processes. Zero understanding. I did want to name some of the folks who supported this bill, and then I wanted to make sure that the list of witnesses was made part of our. Thank you, Mr. Linsizen. You don't have to respond to this part. And I want to make sure that the witness list from the House bill and the Senate bill were included in our official minutes. Councilmember Tovo had noted that some developers in our community were involved, Homebuilders Association of Greater Austin was involved, the Texas Apartment Association, KB Homes, Allen Boone Humphreys Robinson, Lennar Homes. All of these folks worked against the best interests of the city of Austin in advocating for these changes to our processes, and I really take exception to that. Pohl Partners, Texas Land Developers Association, Newland, the Texas Public Policy Foundation, the Real Estate Council of Austin, the Texas Land Developers Association. There were 7 cities, as well as Austin, that spoke against these changes, from the city of Galveston, El Paso, Houston. I've never heard of the city of Fate, but I think I should go visit that. That's a great name for a city. Plano, Dallas, and San Antonio. And then, of course, the Commissioner's Court sent a resource witness. It's just a short little list of cities, municipalities that are affected by this, but the fact of the matter is when this really becomes clear to everybody across the state, all of the governing entities that are responsible for land development processes and procedures, they're going to understand how our hands have been tied behind our back to the detriment of our communities. And I just want us to be really clear about that. And I'll just repeat that I am confident that the state legislature has zero understanding about the complexities of land development code and processes, and that they probably were happy to make these changes based on the list of folks who came. Here's another one, Coates Rose Law Firm, Texas Realtors, Greater Houston Builders Association. It's a big, long list, so we'll make sure that we get that included in the official minutes. Thank you.
Mayor. Mr. Linsheisen, can you help me understand when this starts applying? So if somebody submitted their application yesterday or last week or next week, which is still before September 1 or September 3 or whenever this goes into effect, when do you become a part of this new process? How does that work?
So for applications that are in process today, they are not able to avail themselves of it. The law actually says for applications submitted after September 1st. For us, that'll actually be September 3rd. Tuesday's the second. The Monday, the 2nd is a holiday, so the first day would be the 3rd. If you're in process today, the law actually doesn't allow you to take advantage of it. So they will, if they're in by next Friday on August 30th, I guess it is. If they're in the process, if they've submitted for review, we'll process them under our current rules.
And do we anticipate that there will be any bogging down or delay of existing applications as you switch over to this new regime, or you guys set up so that it can transition?
No, sir, I don't anticipate a delay. I don't think it'll change anything. I think we're okay there. The first applications that we'll get to commission after going through our process, the 3rd-day review, will probably be mid-October at the earliest. And so we have time to get all these final details worked out and continue to work on the applications that are in process today.
And so the shot clock provisions will apply if you submit on September 3rd, but if we pass this today and you submit it next week, it still doesn't apply until September 3rd.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And then did you say something about site plans and whether site plan revisions do or don't apply?
Based on our legal guidance, site plans are not included in this legislation.
Got it. Okay.
Before we take a vote, I just say that, just to remark that today we're forced to comply as a state government mandates local rules. I want to be really clear, the state is making local government more expensive and less responsive to the will of the local community, not just Austin, but cities across the state. This again is our state government striking a blow against local liberty. It's a sad day and unlike the spirit of Texas. Any further discussion? Is there a motion to approve? Ms. Flanagan makes a motion. Is there a second? Council Harper Madison seconds. Any discussion? Those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed? Those abstaining? Alter and Pohl abstain. The others on the dais voting yes. Off the dais is Councilmember Garza. Councilmember Garza off the dais, 2 abstentions. The others voting aye. passes. Okay, we have 30 minutes left. Let's do we ready to do signs? We ready to do that? Okay, let's call